you wouldn't feel as safe in Russia until you get some muscles. Russian mafia, and Russian mafia was basically like the story of people who went obsessively to the gym in 80s, and then they realized, once you're just like big and jacked, you can just go and just get money from the people who just started doing business or something like that. So it was actually like the story like that. So it was like this culture of very masculine men, and you wouldn't feel actually safe until you do some sport.
Hi, welcome back to Wenshe Hebrew Talk. I'm your host, Yating. Today, we will have a discussion with our guest speaker, Dimitri. Dimitri is the host of podcast Universal Wavefunction. He's a researcher in geopolitics and history, focusing on Russia's relations with the West. Outside of intellectual work, he keeps a serious strength training routine, from heavy lifts to calisthenics. And today we make a personal interview with him, and then it's more like a flow conversation. I will start with my questions since we know each other in a calisthenics park in summer. And so I will start some questions about sports because I think the first time I met you, it was quite impressive. You were doing handstand and then some dips with 30 or 40 dips and then push-ups. That's crazy.
Yeah.
And then you mentioned that you work out every day to get this really strong athletics body. And then, so what motivates you to work so hard?
And thanks for the invitation and for the interview. I'm happy to be here. And regarding sports, it's a very good question. Sometimes it's not that I cannot answer you fully why I work out. But for me, I just feel like my body needs this process in order to think better, in order to generate ideas. I feel movement is just part of my, I would say, just my being. I cannot live without some type of movement, and it just gives me a lot of energy. So it's something that I'm so used to that it's just part of me. But of course, it's something that just motivates me to grow as an individual. Yeah, if it makes sense.
Yeah, because that is interesting because I also feel somehow in the same way since I start workout in the gym. And then I just feel like it's kind of something like a negative feedback. If you don't train, you feel bad. Yeah. And then you train and then maybe you get some dopamine or some energy. But I also heard there's some critics about this because some people say that there's a lot of narratives about from fat to fit and then from skinny to fit, that this type of narrative, and it's just if you have a very fit or muscular body, then it has been shaped as something really positive. But if you are an average or you're just fat, and then there's some kind of have some a discrimination, and then I would call some leftist person who are really active in this body politics, or we call it biopolitics. They say everybody is beautiful, every type of body is beautiful, and then no matter you are fat or thin, or it's just this type of narrative. And then and my question is that, what do you think of this term as someone who is really, really muscular? And
So I think there are two questions maybe here, maybe two ways to answer it. It's one way, of course, the whole body positivity topic is a pretty big one, also pretty big in academia. I've finished academia, so I can definitely tell you for certain that it's a big part of discussions. And I can understand where it comes from, because if you think about 20th century, the whole concept was to force people into sports, either from American side or Soviet Union side. So those were two big blocks, and people always try to, from state, can impose sports on you, something you have to do for their own state-related aims and reasons. But if you think about maybe from the perspective of, your body is your partially animal. Your body belongs to this material world, and in a sense, it wants to generate some movement. It's like you as an animal, you would have a very active life, And if you even look at tribes in America or something like this, native tribes in America or South Africa or South America, I mean, you would see that they don't do sports in general, but they stay active because they have to. So for me, it's just a part. I think it's just my body just needs that, and I can neither feel good nor function well without fulfilling the need of my body to be active. So I guess it maybe it replies. I mean, I think it's like a body positivity. It's a big topic, but it's better to do what feels good for you. So don't really look at the body positivity topic and try and think of it as something that constrains you, I would say.
Yeah, I think I feel somehow the same way, because even though this type of body politics like tell you like how this body or has been constructed by power, and then I think somehow these biopolitics is positive or is meaningful somehow, because they tell people like how this discourse or the certain narrative has been constructed by power, and then we should somehow deconstruct it. It's kind of like a meaningful activity, but somehow like as a human, and then we need certain movements. We cannot just say that, because it's like really right wing, because like some Nazi Germany or like Soviet Union, they promote this type of really masculine body or really fit body, and we don't do that because we are leftists. So because there's certain like nowadays on social media, you can see different type of these ideas.
It's also easy for people to justify why they don't do sports by saying it's something that it comes from, I don't know, it comes from the capitalism or from the state. So in a way, you have to be careful what type of information you take for granted and just be critical, because certainly I also would want some authority imposing some type of idea that I have to do sports on me. I mean, if anything, I don't know how it is in China. Like in Russia, you still have to do a lot of sports when you were a kid in school, so you have like a physical process, and it's pretty annoying. It's like you don't want to do them because it's just something that just takes a lot of your time. Or instead of like playing football, they force you to do some stupid stuff. And I didn't like that part. I mean, I think no one likes when you try to force you into something that you don't feel like doing. So I understand why people like choose it as a research question, because there's definitely certain type of leaning in the state to force to do something with your body. And they're kind of designed, like I said, they're designed to do so. But then you need to ask yourself, what makes you feel good? And if something makes you feel good, then, truly makes your body and your mind feels good, then you probably should stick to it, I would say.
Yeah. So when you grew up in Russia, like sport has been like your daily life in school?
I played a lot of tennis when I was young. I mean, not connected to school, but I played tennis since I was 6 to like 14 professionally.
So is it like a kind of like a Russian culture, like a social culture after the Soviet Union collapsed, or like it's actually started from Soviet Union that the whole society really emphasized sport?
Yeah, I think I would say in Russia, it's very weird not to do some sport when you're a kid. I mean, it can also be some people, some of my friends, they played a lot of chess or something like this. So you have to go and chess is considered technically a sport. So you have to do some activity that generative, so to speak, that can like either like sport related or competitive related in Russia. So it's something that all parents, they give their kids to those communities where you do those type of things. It's very natural, yeah.
Oh, I think it's in China. In my year when I grew up, it's quite different. Like even though we have certain PE class at the school, and then we were forced to do jogging every day. That's why still I feel really miserable for that. But the problem is that most of the teachers don't really teach us how to do it in the right way, how to do sports in the right way, because they would just so lazy, or somehow they feel that if they teach too much, and then the student can have the risk to get injured, and then they take some responsibility, and also there's a certain kind of social culture that they think like sports is useless, like for like ordinary kids that you just have to study hard, and then doing sports is just a waste of time. And I think compared with others, like out school activities, like for example in my case, my parents would rather to bring me to like learn English or some like instrument or dance. I mean, because I'm a girl, and then they think it's better to do this rather than to learn some MMA or like other stuff. So I mean, I grew up in this type of environment that no one really tell you that sports is important. And then so until my early 20s, and I feel that sports was really miserable for me. And then since I don't know when it started, I just feel like this strong women looks really nice when I start my college, and then I think, okay, I'm gonna do something, and then I really like this feeling.
Right. Yeah, in Russia, I think it's also the case that like if you're a girl, then you probably, I mean, there is a chance you probably wouldn't do some sports or some dancing instead, or some other social type of activity. That's also the case. I mean, maybe less so than in China. I'm not exactly sure, but it's also not that. It's not 100% common that every girl would do some type of sport. Yeah, but a lot of them still do, because there is also the gymnastics is very popular, or some other type of sports or ice skating or something like that. Yeah, people still, I mean, a lot of girls do that as well in Russia. Yeah.
Yeah. In China, I mean, we're also kind of called like a sports country because we have so many excellent athletes. And but it's just a really, really small, percentage of people who really focus on sport. But for the most average person like me, we just don't focus on that. We just focus on your study. I
know whether it's true, because I've heard in China it's still the case, like in the Soviet Union, where they see a person with like a perfect, build for weightlifting, and they would say, you have to do like Olympic. Sure, that's the case. I guess in Russia it's not the case anymore, but there's still, of course. I mean, because in Russia, there are, like, at least in Moscow, there are those big, I would say, schools of athletic, the sports schools, right? And once you go there is also the chance that if you see you are built for some sport, they would probably say you have to do that because, you were just built for that sport. So it's also the case. I mean, it's just interesting that it's still practiced in China.
Yeah, I would say so, because for many type of projects, it's kind of like national, for example, like gymnastics. But in recent years, I think China's gymnastics is kind of getting worse, and then because this is also related with the comments of like what is good gymnastics. And then what I heard that in China they have different views of muscles, because they don't really like women have big muscles. What I refer to is just female gymnastic athletes. And then because these gymnastics athletes, they were like really, really small. They were even smaller than me. And then what I heard that they are not allowed to eat a lot because they just really focus on techniques. But what I heard that the gymnastics in the US, they really focus on how to build the muscles for the athletes.
Right.
I don't know, what's the situation in Russia?
I think it's interesting that you brought up the United States, because I think there is a difference in approaches in general in the United States and in Russia/China. Because in China, it almost feels, or in Russia as well, it almost feels like an athlete represents the country, so they can invest a lot of into this infrastructure around bringing people from the street and giving them the best education, qualification, or just trainings that they can. And then once this individual achieves something, it's almost like the achievement is part of the society, right? And I think in the American case, it's almost always an individual story. And you always hear it from also even like a chess players or like a famous athletes. It's almost like the story of struggle of someone wanting to be something, but society prevents actually him from doing sports, and then the person perseveres. It's very different mythological stories that you hear in terms of athleticism in Russia or China and versus athleticism in America, which is interesting because it also there is this, of course, it's something to analyze, of course, is how we conceptualize sports in society, and of course achievements of great athletes in society as well.
Yeah, and then I think the attitude towards sports is also related to how this country or the society consider about being strong or the beauty standard. I mean, for example, in China, like I think our beauty standard is nothing related with sports or like muscular, for example, for men. I mean, it's also kind of like an East Asia thing. Like, I don't know if you know this K-pop or J-pop, like singers, and then they were like really pale, and then they will. Of course, they are tall, but they don't have like a muscle. And for female, it's the same. Like in China, there's the traditional Chinese beauty standard is like the women has to be 瘦白又弱 means 瘦 means skinny, 白 means pale, 幼 means like you look like a teenager or underaged, and then 弱 means that you are very weak. That is, I think it's quite influential because like I think I was born in 1990s, and then when I was grew up in the early 2000s until when I was in my early 20s, and then it was like girls around me like saying, oh, I have to lose weight. I mean, at the beginning I also thought like this, like I think I'm always too fat because even though back then I was only 40 kilos. Yeah. So like it's never enough, and then we just judge each other by, oh, you look so you look so dark, you are not pale enough, because then this is like quite toxic for me since I start sports, and then I don't care that anymore.
True. Of course, the different incentives, I would say, in society to pursue and not to pursue sports. I would say as a man growing up in Russia, I think like self-defense is also like a big thing, I would say, because I did like both martial sports, and I mean, you wouldn't feel as safe in Russia until you get some muscles. I don't know. It's like at least when I was growing up, I don't know how it is. I mean, it is still the case. I mean, I also grew up, I mean, basically in 2000s, which was after 90s, and 90s was a very tough time in Russia.
Yeah.
And in Russia, they had this culture around, Russian mafia, and Russian mafia was basically like the story of people who went obsessively to the gym in 80s. And then they realized, once you're just like big and jacked, you can just go and just, get money from the people who just started doing business or something like that. So it was actually like the story like that. So it was like this culture of very masculine men, and you wouldn't feel actually safe until you do some sport. So, I mean, I did a lot of martial sports as well. Also partially because it just makes you feel safe in Russia. I don't know whether, I mean, it's still probably the case because there is still this, in Russia, I would say just regular, like in people's culture, there is still a lot of, let's say, just admiration with this, almost like a mafia style people, and you just feel safe. Yeah, once doing sports, you feel safer when you do sports. Then
I think it's quite different because I think like in the 1990s, early 2000s in China, we also have like certain mafias. And then because back then like the state power wasn't that so strong. And then particularly I was from the northeast of China, and then which is famous for the Chinese mafia. In my memory, like these, gangsters, they follow with them, and then they were like really, really skinny. And then it's just really different type of like body shape, like skinny, and then just dye their hair into yellow and then smoke. And then in my memory, or in some like certain like media image, like these mafia, they were not really muscular, they were actually really fat.
Interesting. Yeah. I mean, in Russia, I think some of them, they're also fat, but their just origin is from, because most of them came from those, what they call in Russia, sections. It's like a sport clubs. Because, I mean, there were a lot of sport clubs in Soviet Union. And a lot of people did, like, I don't know, judo, karate, on a very, I mean, obviously the highest possible level, because like Soviet athletes were like the best in the world, basically. But, once the crash in society happened, it's like first of all, they didn't know where to get money, because the only thing you can do is just like to do karate. So what would you do with the skill? I mean, and in 90s, the skill became very valuable because obviously you live in this anarchic society where it's like everyone against everyone. So you can literally use your skills to generate income by being mafia. I mean, Russian bandits, I would say, mafia. So it's something that was valuable in Russian society. And to a certain point, still, I would say, is valuable in Russian society. Yeah.
Oh, so, this type of sports culture is kind of related to the collapse of Soviet Union and then the hard 1990s?
Yeah. I would say in Russian, there is like a saying, once you have like, it's like not a perfect translation, but in Russia, you say, once you have a power, you don't need anything else. But power, it means like once you have a physical power, you don't need to have intelligence or something like that, which is, it says you a lot about mentality. Yeah.
It's quite different. Like in China, we have a certain word called like everything is, it's the lowest level unless like reading.
Lowest level, you mean?
Like, because we say like 万般皆下品, everything except reading, everything is in the lower level. Like we really like think like reading or being intellectual is something very nice. I mean, even though we experienced the Mao Zedong's era that is really has a lot of crackdown on intellectuals, but I still think like many Chinese, and then we just think being intellectual is way better than being like athletes or so that's what they like. I think they like the guys like who has really high education rather than they are being very jacked.
I think in China is famous for being, I mean, of course people talk about like international politics, but being very strategic. And I think it's something that definitely comes also from not necessarily from the state, but probably it's also part of Chinese society to think way ahead in terms of what type of, and of course, I mean, I think it's true in most of the case. If you are really very intelligent, you don't need to have a lot of muscles, because like with intelligence, you can you can generate money. With money, you can buy everything else. I mean, it actually makes sense.
I mean, so nowadays, I mean, things is getting changed. It's like there's a lot of tension because like the beauty standards start to change because many women or girls, they start to like these guys who are very muscular, who like looks very jacked and looks very good looking. Because in the past, like how man looks, in the dating market doesn't matter at all. But now it does matter. And then this is like some guys, they just didn't realize it, and then they just quite like don't understand like why it's like this. I mean, I have very high education, I have money, but women just don't like me. But it's not like 100% like it, just certain cases, because there's some like the host who is very famous host is point this reality that they thought like if they have the knowledge, they have the money, they have this like social status, and then the girls will like them, but it's not like this. So there's certain tension. But another problem is that there's of course also some critics, I think also kind of related to nationalism, that because nowadays women start to work out a lot in China because they want to get stronger, because it's also related with the narrative of feminism. And then there's another type of narrative is that okay, if you just make your body like look really strong, you got very strong thigh and then very strong glute, and then it's just really aligned with the Western beauty standard. And it's like, are you just trying to chase these Western guys? Because there's a certain tension that's related to feminism and nationalism.
Yeah, that's a definitely interesting question. Why you do sports, and what is your incentive to do sport? Because it's always, I might get my best guess. It's always partially cultural. I mean, and partially comes from within. At least for me, I would say. I mean, it would be lie to say that I don't do sports for looks or something like that, because I obviously do. I mean, but it's not something that. I mean, but also there is part of me, again, there is that I cannot live without it, because it's just the requirement of my body. Yeah.
I feel so. Like I think once sports or just working out being part of your habit, and then it's hard to get rid of it, because I just feel hard like recently, because I have to finish my dissertation, and then I don't have a lot of energy to do sports, but at the same time I just feel a little bit anxious and then guilty that I mean, do I get fat or do I just being out of shape? I think I'm just easy to get anxious on this point, but yeah.
The good thing about that's how we met. I think sport actually unites a lot of people. So if you do sports, you can connect to so many different people.
Sure.
And I mean, I've connected to a lot of people through sports, because everyone does some type of sport. I mean, even if you just walk. I mean, like my thesis supervisor, I remember he did a lot of biking and some like push-ups and pull-ups, and I think it's something that still interests everyone. It's like there is no person that is completely indifferent to like any sport activity. So you probably still engage either as a spectacular or as just as an observer or as a participant in some type of sport activity. So it's just a good thing to do, because it's a way to connect to other people as well, I feel.
True, yeah, like how we met each other.
Yeah,
That's
yeah. That's true.
Yeah. And by the way, another question is that, do you take some, very strict food with routine, or just you take some supplement?
Yeah, it is like very dialed in. Again, something that I do. I don't even consider it something that is. I don't invest, a lot of mental energy into doing it. Something just became a default. I just, eat very clean. I more or less know what I eat in terms of calorie intake because I calculated calories for like last 2 years. It's something that comes after certain practice as a very natural process to you. I don't take it I just take maybe creatine, don't take a lot of supplements because they're expensive. And it's also, I don't like to be reliant on any particular substance. So I try to be very natural in my just way of thinking, in my other pursuits. And I feel always I don't want to be dependent on this or that thing because once the thing is gone, you almost feel like anxiety that without this thing you couldn't achieve something.
So that's my philosophy. Well, like a very natural.
Yeah. Exactly.
Because it's just one question came to my mind is that nowadays people criticize sport because it's really to capitalism. Like first, like they think like for the person who has a really strong and fit body, it means that it actually reveals some structure in equality because one, it means that this person, you have time and you have the money to buy these supplements and to eat clean food. And then, but not everyone has this because there's so many people, they have to use this like highly processed food to stimulate them to be happy. And then they have to work overloaded. So this is like one point. And another point is that if you want to have this type of body like on the commercial and or on social media, they just make people quite anxious about how they look. And then these commercials about steroid and then about over other supplements, they just come to you, and then it's quite like related to consumerism. So there's certain critics. But for my case, I think, it depends on how do you think. Like for example, like I personally, I'm not that strict for everything. So for me, I think sports is not really an expensive thing.
I think. Yeah, there of course there's like a few topics here. Steroids epidemic is of course a very bizarre but also very human, I think, part of human experience where people just take it to extreme. And of course it's just very sad to see like so many people doing it in such a young age where they completely don't understand what they're doing and they completely don't know the cost, because like steroids are just drugs. So they just become drug addicts for the sake of just looking good, and they don't really understand. Until you come like 25 or 30, you don't really understand what kind of repercussions this practice has. Of course, it's like a very tragic story. But in terms of capitalism, but you can be very, of course, minimalist actually, and of course, living a healthy life. It doesn't really cost that much because even if you buy like the cheapest meat and just eat rice, it's not actually way much more expensive than processed food.
True.
Because processed food is actually pretty expensive as well. So it's all about what you choose to spend your energy and your investment in terms of money or time in doing. Because of course, maybe clean food requires cooking. And if you, of course, I cook for myself as well, but. Of course, it would be nicer if I had like a personal chef or something like this. It would make my life easier. But since I don't, I choose to invest my time into cooking because I don't buy processed foods. And it's something that I feel, in a way, the practice of doing sports and just living a healthy life also becomes this practice of being a little bit contrarian, doing something that is harder than. It's just harder for people to do, but it has like a certain. It's like why there is a reason why it's harder, because it gives something in return in the future. So this is how I also think about those topics. Yeah.
So how do you connect your sport with your intellectual work?
That's an interesting question. I think, of course, I think like for me, sport is just part of my life, significant part, but not all encompassing, because I am an intellectual person. I cannot really live without, I would say, intellectual stimulation. And sport for me is also part to really push the boundaries and see where the what's my ultimate development in a physical sense. And also for me, sport recently, I would say recent year became more meditative experience. I would say in a way that I try not to listen to music while I'm working out. I try to really concentrate on my body as almost like a meditative object. So for me, like recently, I think about sports more in a way with like an embodied presence, like embodied philosophy almost. Because just for me, it just makes my life so much more rich, I would say. So this is how I connect the two levels. But it has been like, I would say, very recent development. So I'm also curious to see how it unfolds.
Yeah, me too. Like,
yeah,
because sports is also a very important part in my life. But nowadays, like, actually, I didn't see too many intellectuals, at least in academia, has like habits with sports, like part of daily life. And then so I wonder how is it connected. I know some people, they have the habit to do sports, but sometimes nowadays academia is like a really, really overloaded work. And somehow they have to give up like the sports somehow, like from like 5 days a week to just once a day. So, but there's another question. And then I think like we talk quite a lot about sports, and then now I want to ask you about your this intellectual work related to your podcast, because you have a very interesting name for a podcast, Universal Wavefunction. Yeah, it is like a quantum idea. So how this connected to your geopolitics studies?
I think you're the first one who actually asked me this question. I secretly wanted like someone to ask me this question, because seriously, I talked to a lot of people, but like no one really asked the question why my podcast has specifically this name. And to be frank, it comes from quantum mechanics. I don't want to just give like the precise description, but it basically describes the whole universe as this superposition of all the states, and it's just basically one equation that kind of describes everything at once. And I just found like this idea is so fascinating, and it's not how people conceive the world. Because, like we think about the world also in international relations and geopolitics as well as a very like a linear process, something that has like a strictly defined, I would say, boundaries, something that is also just linear. But, and then I thought I thought with myself, but if the world is deeply, and as far as we understand, like the quantum mechanics describes the world way much more precise than any other theory of the material world. So if the world is deeply quantum, it also should have like a very, very great, like very strong implications for like a social studies or social dynamics, so to speak, because it actually means that our thinking about the world is incomplete, I would say. And for me, this is the way to understand reality I would say just trying to take many ideas at once and think about social world and including geopolitics and international relations as an interconnected web of I would say activities and domains. So I don't really think, for example, about international relations as just one aspect of my interests, but I'm also very interested in philosophy. I'm also very interested in relationships, and I think in a way those topics you can find a lot of connections between them. Again, because they're actually really connected, or at least you can make them connected. So this is why it's universal wave function. So it is something. It's an idea for me, at least as I see it now. It's trying to find some universality in actually multiplicity. So if it makes sense,
it sounds like very interesting for me, because it sounds like you use this name like to really detect or explore the world, because not only focus on geopolitics or international relations. This is just a part of your thinking, and then you also want to, because you mentioned that our thinking of the world is incomplete, and then you want to just explore more topics.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And I think it's just a very good metaphor for exploring the world itself. And of course, I think each of us tries to understand some, I would say, one aspect of reality, but in a way, we always try to understand the bigger picture. So I think like the beauty of the concept is just by trying to understand a very small subset of reality, you probably contribute to understanding something bigger. So this is my thinking about that.
Yeah, that's a really beautiful metaphor, actually. Because I think like some quantum idea is related to mathematics, and then it's, I mean, the final direction of mathematics is always, or physics is always about philosophy, about how do we think, or how do we think, consider this world. So this is a really beautiful metaphor. I like this intake.
I mean, I started my true exploration of, I would say, geopolitics and international relations, sitting with this, I would say, anxiety and trying to understand reality with the theories that existed, and just being very dissatisfied because they always provide like those definite answers to problems that seem like, I mean, they don't seem, I would say, they don't quite. For me, at least, I had a feeling they failed to actually understand something or explain something, but because of the power of academia and those disciplines, they tend to look impressive, but they actually lack explanatory power, or at least they just describe very small, I would say, subset of something. But then they want to make it look like it explains everything. It gives them a lot of predictive power, even though I mean, quite honestly, I think it does not. So and then for me, it was always exploration of different ideas and how you can relate, I would say, ideas outside international relations, classical international relations theories, how you can apply them to international relations. And then, I mean, I did a lot of, I would say, post-structuralist theories and stuff like this. And I mean, a lot of actually post-structural theories inspired by quantum mechanics, or just some innovations in science and technology. Because I think we just don't, I mean, it's one thing also to mention, we just do not understand actually the fundamental layer of physical reality. So there's always like a mystery there. And for me, it's also like there's always a mystery in international relations itself. Yeah,
I think it's quite insightful, and then that's also like why I start to make podcasts, because I think somehow the academic world, like they just really focus on like really certain small topics, but somehow, because like nowadays, if you want to publish something, you just can't say that I'm gonna write like a really huge landscape of this certain field, and then like you have to focus on really small topic, because there's so many excellent scholars. But what I feel is like there's also some like conversation between academia and then the public. So yeah. And then I think even though podcast is not really considered as publications, but it's a very good way that for you to connect with people, or you explore different ideas. Like not only focus on like a certain fields, for example, like history or geopolitics or international relations, you can just include more idea in this conversation.
Yeah, I think the podcast is a place to, as you said, develop your own ideas and see how they resonate or do not resonate with other people. It's a very human, experience. And of course, I think I'm grateful to academia for teaching me how to think. But then I think at a certain point, you might realize that you yourself, I mean, at least in my personal journey, I think academia doesn't satisfy my needs to explore it further, because it tries to keep me very, in a way, constrained by its own standards, because it always tries to force you into exploring just this subset. And of course, there are there are theorists who also theorize about international relations, so on and so forth. But then I'm not sure whether it's something that I really want to engage. Maybe in the future, if I feel I really have, like, we'll say, question to understand. But I think academia is also a little bit detaching from reality itself, as you also maybe described, because it fails to kind of integrate in the changing world, I feel.
Yeah, true. I mean, particularly nowadays, the world is changing too much compared with like 10 years or 20 years ago. Like, I just feel that somehow academia these intellectuals, they are kind of backward in this really contested like intellectual debate, because nowadays I found like actually podcasters or some like social media influencers, they are really, you know, quite wanted. They have, you know, they are much influential than intellectuals. I mean, just think about like the Charlie Kirk or like Hassan Abi Hiker. Oh, what is his name?
Right.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I think, but also the danger, I think that a lot of people who attract a lot of attention online, they're actually, I don't want to say they're not educated, but they're very simplistic in their thinking.
Yeah.
And thus they attract a lot of people. There is also a connection there. Of course, like populists always attract more attention than people who try to think deeply and try to question something, because people love answers and they don't really like to sit with uncomfortable they don't really to sit in the state of being uncomfortable that there is no answer. So they need answers, and those people, they provide like a simplistic answer saying, oh, you know, it's like it's let's just blame Hispanic or let's just blame black people for everything, and so on and so forth. I mean, it resonates them because I think people do have like the tendency to be very uncomfortable with unknown. And I think academia, to an extent, I mean, it teaches you to live with unknown, because I mean, at a certain point, especially in social sciences, you come to realization very fast that like there is no ground truth to explain everything. It's like it's always I don't want to say it's like it's mysterious necessarily, but there's always a level to go deeper. So, and like from one abstraction to another, and then it just basically shatters your previous concepts. Because I think I bet you also had those experiences that you thought that something is truth for some time. Maybe you were like engaged in some idea, but then you found some like strand of literature that completely shatters this understanding, and then you just like, oh, you know, at a certain point, I wish I probably hadn't discovered this because you know I definitely believed in these categories, and the world seems so it was so easy to explain the world in those categories. But, you know, once those categories are gone, it's like now you sit again with your thoughts and trying to figure it out.
Yeah, I think my research topic is exactly the case that's discussing China's economic reform. Like, there's always a narrative about how successful this reform it is and then how, you know, the unique China model it is. But until I reach this field, I read more literatures and some archives, then I just start question myself, like, is this like certain was called China model really unique, and then or like how does the China try to get these reform ideas, or is it like a really China story, or it's more like global story? But it's another topic. This is like my research, my dissertation is a really huge topic. Like so I won't really talk too much about in this interview. And then, so I think you just basically mentioned like the motivation for you to make this podcast. Like and then another question is maybe related to your experience in Germany and then Russia, like since we mentioned academia, like and then you also has like experience studying in Moscow, if I remember well. Like, do you find there's some differences?
Yeah, I mean, I studied at MGIMO University, which is I don't know whether there is something like this in China. So, but in Russia, I would say if you want to work for Ministry of Foreign Affairs, you have to go and study in this school.
Yeah.
So actually 99% of people working in the ministry come from this school. It's 98, I don't know, maybe like a 2% of subset, like a people who study like, I would say physics or nuclear energy or something like this. They go into department related to nuclear stuff or some very specific technical things. But 98% graduates from like MGIMO University. So I went there because I wanted to be Russian diplomat. So I thought. But then, of course, I didn't understand. I mean, I was 17, so I didn't understand implications of this idea because, I mean, I had a lot of homeschooling experience, I would say, during high school. And I didn't really understand what it means, like what Russian society actually means. So for me, going to university was this experience of going into free academia, similar to American academia, or something like you have at High University, something like this. Meaning that you just go there to mostly explore yourself or your interests. It's like it's a free place, so you can explore those different ideas. And of course, MGIMO University was like just the opposite of that. It was just it's just like a military school, but for humanities. They didn't really care about any ideas, exploration of ideas, but they gave you just a ton to learn in terms of languages, and you just had to follow those rules. Even though like the cost benefit of that, I mean, I realized it quickly. It's just pointless to learn language like this. Yeah, of course, you would still get a very decent at speaking language or just decent at translation, I would say. But at the cost of just spending 5 hours a day, like really studying just only language, because other disciplines, they were just not really important there.
Wow.
So, and for them, I mean, it totally makes sense why they do that, because they want to choose people who are brilliant. I mean, because it's a hard or study program. And who are fine with just doing what your superiors telling you to do without kind of asking questions. So you just have to do it. And if you don't understand why, or I mean, just do it. Just don't ask questions. It's like, so this is like the philosophy of MGIMO, and I bet nothing really changed since then, because they really need people in the ministry who would do exactly that during work. So just they would work a lot, but they wouldn't ask additional questions because they don't need that. And of course, I was very, I would say, disappointed with the experience, and it's not something I realized I wanted to do. And for me, at this particular time, it was 2018, 19, it was the time that Russia was turning more authoritarian, obviously, and it was a choice for me. There was no basic institution that would satisfy my curiosity in Moscow. So I chose university in Germany because it's for free. I would say that was mine. Even though I actually studied French, I still speak technically better French than German. But because it was much harder to get into French school than German school. I mean, because it's for like free school, I would say. So I ended up here. Yeah.
So it's like a quite huge shift. Like
it was quite huge shift, but actually for me very satisfying, because at Freie Universität I think I found what I was searching for, meaning just like this academic freedom. I think it's still maybe not that free as American university, because you still have to do the curriculum, but it's still in comparison to Russia, it was just a heaven.
So it's only like your university is like this, or like other university also has the same atmosphere?
No, it was specifically MGIMO. I mean, there are like very free universities, but then after that universities, you couldn't go and work in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. And in Russia, after I would say graduating international relations, and you can still, back in the day, like Russia was integrated more or less into Western world or the global world. Of course, there were places to work, especially with European languages. But now, of course, just even places, once you have a degree, I would say from other universities outside MGIMO in international relations or political science, you wouldn't really find a job anyway. It's harder. So, yeah. So
in general, like other Russian universities do have some like the freedom of discussion in academia?
The situation is worse now. I think very few have. They do probably still have some freedom, but of course now it's very limited. The situation was also, I would say, during the time I moved, the situation was also changing rapidly, which means that now there are only few, I would say, places that are really. The few places where you can actually have a decent discussion, I would say. They all more or less became part of Russian political agenda.
It's more like propaganda or unfortunately. So it sounds like intellectuals who had some certain what we call liberal status, or they experience a hard time.
You can criticize the West a lot. You love to do it. That's you can if you want to go and research bad economic situation in Germany, happy to do so with all the information from the Germany. Because what's interesting also about MGIMO, they still gave a lot of, for example, free press to us to read in English, like language courses, French or English, because you still need to understand as a diplomat, of course, the I would say, the cultural dynamic of this country. So what those people are thinking about and stuff like this. So that actually very interesting to see how, you were reading all those articles about authoritarianism from The Economist or New York Times, and you had to translate them or whatever. And then, of course, there's no way you wouldn't really, think about those questions deeply in a way you wouldn't implicate those ideas on the Russian case. But of course, the Russian case was kind of prohibited case to think about. So, I mean, even back then, it was something, it's a very uncomfortable topic. I mean, of course, you could technically have a discussion with some professors, but that was a very uncomfortable discussion for everyone. Yeah.
But then it sounds like you choose to be rebellious.
Yeah. Because I mean, I could, but also it comes from my experience because I didn't really, I can say I was never integrated into Russian society because I wasn't homeschooling a lot. So I didn't really get a full experience of being like a fully integrated person in Russian society, which also makes it for me harder to understand how people just obey the rules because for most people in Russia, that comes as just a natural thing to do. And of course, I mean, it's not that Russian people not critical or they don't understand. I guess maybe it's similar in China. I don't know, but it's like they do understand everything. It's like they're not stupid. It's just like there is nothing for them to do. And I mean, of course, in most people, as a default setting, they choose to just to keep silent or just discuss those issues only in private with your relatives or just close friends, because there is just no point in doing it in public, or because if anything, you only get your life worse.
I think somehow what you just described is a kind of similar situation in China. Like nowadays, I think the intellectuals also know this type of like tensions related to nationalism and then this changing geopolitics, but then they just keep silent, and then we because we have our works to do, we have to like really focus on our academia work because they have to publish a lot because that's called academic task. If you don't finish this task, you get fired. So and then also I was like I think like 5 years ago, like there's many like just some like young students like in my age, and then because they discuss about like if they should join the Communist Party, and then it's just like we don't know what is Marxism. We don't know that, but they just say that yeah, but I need to find a good job, so I have to join the party, even though who cares about what is Marxism? But it's kind of like this. Everyone, they know that this is how it's going to be like, but they just keep silent because we can't do anything.
Yeah, I mean, it's exactly the same in Russia, even though they don't force people technically to be part of Russian state, because like, and at least it's not like in China and Soviet Union where you have like one party, and officially they have a few parties, but like the system is everywhere. So if you want to work for, let's say, university, you do have to kind of fulfill a certain requirements in the sense of how you talk and speak. I mean, of course, it's all implicit. It's not like there is a supervisor coming to you and telling you what to say, but like everyone has to adhere to certain standards.
I feel you, because that's why I also feel very stressful when I go back to Chinese university and talk with the supervisors, or it's not like certain like rules writing in the textbook. It's just like the certain cultural things. And then I remember that when I take the courses in IFU, the first year my PhD is about like institutionalism, and then it's like there's some institutions that written in the law, but there's a certain, it's like a culture is also kind of institution. It's just didn't write in the law, and then you just have to follow this certain like criteria and then how other people behave. And for me, I also think sometimes I'm not really kind of consider myself as rebellious because but it's just I think I'm also like different with others because I'm quite sensitive, and then I just feel like this pressure, or like how do you behave, and also about like uncle culture, like you have to drink with others, and then you have to be like a really really nice girl, and then just somehow it's make me like really really stressful. So and then I'm quite happy staying here, to be honest.
Right. And the interesting thing is like people, I would say people who understand Russian state closely, I mean, behind closed doors, they are probably the worst critics, because they do see the corruption. It's like for corruption for them, it's something abstract. I mean, it's like, even for example, I know people who work for like MGIMO University, let's say, and they do see like a blatant corruption that's happening on a daily basis, like something. But people get accepted to university for money. It's something that is completely, actually, even in Russian standards to a certain extent, would be unacceptable, and they see it every day. So they actually like the worst critics of the system. But then, because they're part of the I'll say part of the process, right? Even corruption scheme, and sometimes they cannot say anything, because like even if you say something, no one would really, you wouldn't be able to do anything with this information. So it's also interesting in this way that it actually makes you more critical the more you know about the state. Like, yeah.
So like the government didn't do anything about the corruption?
I mean, I think in Russian case, I think I'm not sure about whether you can implicate it to Chinese case, but corruption is part of the system. It's like how you keep the state running. Unfortunately, I think you cannot really. I don't know to what extent you can actually have a very functioning Russian state without corruption. Just because the system is designed in a way, it's like corruption becomes its own institution, and there is no way to just get around it.
No, somehow it's the same, but like in the past, like I think before 2013, there's even some narratives say that corruption actually helps stimulate the economy. It's found that there's so many similarities between Russian and Chinese societies, and I think we just already talked for 1 hour, and then maybe we in the next episode we will talk like about Sino-Russian relations, since we have so many similarities.
That's true. Maybe it has something to do with like this Mongol influence. Maybe. I don't know.
And thank you for joining me.
Thank you. It was a pleasure.